Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Deep Rock Galactic. Today we're going to be doing another primary weapon video similar to what we did for the gunner and the engineer, but this time going through the scout and his primary weapon. And thankfully this is probably going to be a lot simpler because the scout has a lot more contemporary and normal weapons compared to the other classes in the game for the most part. So thankfully this shouldn't be nearly as difficult to talk about. And the scout's weapons all more or less do very similar things, just kind of with different specialties here and there, but we'll go through it all. And we're going to go through and talk about each of the primary weapons in terms of their strengths, their weaknesses, good overclocks that they might have, good mission types that you can use them on, and some decent mutators that you might want to consider bringing them if you see. So without further ado, let's just get right into the video. So first up, we have the Deep Core GK2 Assault Rifle, the default weapon that the scout starts off with, and it is the all-rounder of the bunch. This thing is pretty much good at just about whatever you can possibly imagine. While it may not necessarily have the raw stopping power of some of the other options or some fancy aspects about it, the assault rifle boasts a very solid accuracy, a good rate of fire, a good healthy ammo pool, and it just all around is a very good general purpose weapon, hence why it's the first thing the scout has access to. It's reliable in basically just about any situation you can think of. It's perfect for anybody who wants to stay mobile and doesn't want to really micromanage their shots a whole lot, which kind of leads us into the main strength of the GK2, which is just its versatility. This thing can be built out for just about any type of build. It can be set up to handle any real situation you need. If you need it for crowd control, you can put it up for that. If you need it for single target damage, it can be useful for that. If you need more ammo, chances are you can do something to give it more ammo. There's basically just an insane number of ways that you can build this thing out, and it really can be good in just about any situation you can think of. I always say the scout is one of the easiest classes to pick up for new players, and the GK2 is probably the main reason for that, just because it's such an easy to use weapon. It's such an easy to understand weapon. It's just a basic assault rifle that if you've played any other FPS, you know how it works, and it just has a multitude of different tools that you can use. And then the main weakness of the GK2 is probably its lack of heavy per shot damage in most cases. Granted, you can make it so that way it does decent damage per shot, but for the most part, this is a weapon of quantity more than quality, at least when it comes to individual shot damage. You're not really going to be able to one-shot anything with this particular weapon, and even at its highest level, if you are using something like, say, AI Stability Engine or anything else that really puts its damage over the top, you're still probably not going to be doing a crazy amount of damage per individual shot, but that's also why this is a very high rate of fire weapon again in most cases. So if you're looking for something that just has a very hard-hitting punch with each individual bullet, it's not going to do that for you, unfortunately. And on that note, some good overclocks to keep in mind when using the GK2. Compact ammo is a good one for just starting off because it gives you just a little bit more magazine size and a little bit better recoil, so it's easier to control. Bullets of Mercy is a personal favorite of mine just because I like to run elemental builds, and it also helps when other people are running elemental builds, which is really nice because it just gives you that extra damage boost whenever something is suffering from an elemental effect. And then a classic, really good one that you can almost never go wrong with is AI Stability Engine. It just makes the weapon incredibly easy to use, practically a laser beam, and it just causes the damage output to be incredibly high. And then talking about good missions to bring the GK2 on, I know this is going to kind of sound like a cop-out, but I really do feel like you could bring this on basically any mission because of just how versatile it is, because of how much you can easily customize it to fit whatever role you need. This thing can really be useful in just about any mission situation. It really doesn't matter what you bring it onto, this thing will be able to do work for you. And the same thing kind of goes for the mutators. Again, it sounds kind of like a cop-out answer, but it really is the case where just about any mutator that you see on a particular mission, this will do wonders for you. If it's one of the heavy swarm ones, if it's one of the ones that makes enemies stronger, you can adjust for that and make it so that way it can handle it very easily. So again, the GK2 overall is just one of the most versatile weapons in the entire game, at least in my opinion, and it can be set up for just about anything you need. Then next up, we have the M1000 Classic, a weapon of elegance and esteem that is perfect for scouts who prefer precision over quantity when it comes to at least their shots. The M1000 excels much better, as you can probably expect, at long-range combat. It is meant to be more of a mid to long-range engagement weapon, and its unique focus shot mechanic where you can hold down the trigger to make a much stronger shot that consumes more ammo is able to do a very good amount of damage, and it obviously has incredible accuracy on top of that. The M1000 is about patience, it's about skill, and it rewards people who take their time to make sure that they line up the right shots. And that again goes into its biggest strength, which is just its range and single target capabilities. This is probably the de facto weapon to go to, at least for the Scout, when it comes to wanting to take out single targets very well, wanting to be a high value target weapon. It is incredibly useful in that situation. Not that you can make it for swarm control, because you can in a couple of different ways, but for the most part, if you want to have a weapon that is really good at taking out big singular threats, this is probably the best thing for you, at least in terms of primaries. The main weakness, at least in most cases, for the M1K is its low overall ammo pool. Obviously, there are a couple of different ways that you can get around that. There's a few overclocks and upgrades and whatnot that you can change to make the ammo situation a little bit better, but for the most part, you really want to be conservative when it comes to your ammo. You don't want to just go crazy with it. Again, unless you're running a couple of specific setups, and the ammo situation is probably going to be the main thing that you're going to have to worry about with the M1K. You're going to have to get a lot of nitro. You're going to need to hit the resupply pretty often. You may even need to be that one teammate who double dips. Just make sure you ask before double dipping, but that is the main issue, at least in my experience with the M1000. And some good overclocks to consider for the M1000. Hover clock is a really fun one, although it's a little bit gimmicky, but I still think it's a lot of fun to use. It can definitely make you sort of feel like an action movie hero. Hipster is one that I personally really like, but that's because I like to use the M1000 more as just a regular weapon, and I don't really use the focus mode a whole lot, but that's just me. And if you are somebody who doesn't like the ammo situation of the M1000 and you want to have a lot more capabilities, especially just as a normal weapon without relying too much on the focus shots, Hipster is really good. And then on the flip side, but also in a bit of a different way, the new Marked for Death is a really good option, at least that I personally like to use, because it allows you to debuff enemies, allows you to make big threats very easy to take out for either yourself or your allies, and it kind of fits into that play style that the Scout has, where it's about information, debuffing, and also just high value target takedowns. So, but there's a ton of other ones, and these were just some of the ones that I personally really like to use. And good mission types for the M1000, obviously elimination is a big one. That's a really good mission type to bring for the M1000, because you can just do heavy damage against the dreadnoughts very, very fast and very consistently, because you don't have to worry about getting close to them, and being able to hit the weak spots. You're able to do insane amounts of damage to them depending on the setup that you have. Industrial Sabotage is another good one, because taking out the Caretaker fight can be annoying, and this gives you the ability to hit the weak spots as well as the ventilation ports very easily as well. And then lastly, Point Extraction, just because the areas are typically so big and wide, you can see a lot of where the enemies are coming from, so range is really not an issue. If there's something problematic off in the distance, you can take it out before it gets anywhere close to your team. And then good mutators to bring for the M1000. Elite Threat's a good one, because again, you can take out the elite threats very quickly. You can soften them up. You can identify which enemies you need to take out quickly, and then just go from there. Regenerating Bugs is also a good one, because it does such high damage per shot. Typically, you're going to be able to take out enemies before they even have a chance to heal, which is really nice, especially those bigger threats. So again, high value target takedowns. And then Mactera Plague is also a good one, just because you're able to take out the Mactera very easily. You don't have to worry about travel time. Again, you have high accuracy, so if there's like a grabber or something in the distance that you don't want to reach your teammates, you can take it out very quickly. And again, just remember that the M1000 is more set up for long range engagement. For the most part, you can obviously change it to do a little bit different, but if you are good with pacing your shots, if you are good with patience, and you want to play a more big game hunter-esque type playstyle, then that's probably what you want to do with the M1000. And then lastly, we have the Drak-25 Plasma Carbine. This is for players who believe that the best aim for a weapon is just more bullets, or in this case, plasma shots, I guess. The Drak fires very fast. It doesn't have to reload. It has a heat system, which is a little bit better, at least in my opinion, although sometimes that comes with its own set of issues. Excels very much at just heavy crowd control, because it fires very fast. You have a lot of ways that you can make the shots hit multiple enemies, or even just do other very useful things. The biggest thing it excels at is elemental damage, with a lot of different setups. And while it doesn't necessarily have the accuracy of the M1000 or the ammo efficiency, at least in most cases with the GK2, it is still capable of dealing good damage in a big area. Again, its biggest strength is got to be its elemental affinity. If you're making an elemental build for the Scout, this is probably what you're going to want to use in most cases. It is capable of not only dealing elemental damage itself with the right setup, but it is able to expedite and help with elemental build setups for not even just yourself, but for the rest of your team. And this also leads to it being very good at crowd control because elemental effects are really good at just taking out big groups of enemies. Its biggest weakness, on the other hand, has got to be its accuracy and its rate of fire. Not rate of fire in the traditional sense, but basically the fact that the projectiles for this weapon have travel time means you kind of need to be a little bit better with leading your shots, at least in most cases. Yes, you can build out to compensate for that a little bit more, but for the most part, the travel time and the fact that this thing has pretty widespread, at least for the most part, is probably the biggest weakness because it's not nearly as accurate as really any of the Scout's primary weapons. And the fact that you have to be a little bit more aware of how far away something is probably the biggest thing that people have to struggle with when it comes to using this particular weapon. But if you can get past that, it's really good. Now, the Drac also has some really good overclocks. It has a lot of interesting options. The rewiring mod is one that I like to use a lot because it basically just allows you to have near infinite ammo. You basically just regenerate ammo every time you overheat, which is really nice. If you're somebody who's struggling with ammo for the plasma carbine, it's a good choice for you to run. The overtuned particle accelerator just really makes your damage incredibly high, although you do have to worry a lot more about heat. But if you want just pure raw damage output, this is a really good choice. And the new conductive thermals, which we got with Season 5, is insanely good. This, again, plays into the elemental setup of the Drac and makes it so that way not only your elements, but also your allies' elements are made even more effective. And then talking about good mission types for the Drac, salvage operations are a good one because, again, it has a lot of wide-reaching effects. You can hit a bunch of enemies depending on what your particular setup is, and it's really good for holdout missions type that. Egg hunts are also a good choice because, again, you're going to have to deal with a couple of swarms throughout the course of those particular missions, and the fact that those missions tend to take place in just sort of centralized locations allow you to make good use of its elemental effects. And also deep scan, just because you have the ability to hit enemies incredibly well when they're in a confined space, and the tunnel for the deep scan going down is just incredibly good. And then lastly, good mutators. Swarmageddon's a good one because the plasma projectiles, especially if you have builds for incredible splash, can take out multiple of them very quickly. Parasites is kind of the same way. You're able to take out big groups of enemies very quickly, so it's not really a big deal. And then Elite Threat can also be a good one, especially if you're running for an elemental debuff type build because you're able to soften them up very quickly for the rest of your teammates to take out. So that wouldn't be a bad choice either. And so there you have it, guys. All of the Scout primary weapons and their pros and cons to each of them. Again, keep in mind, this is basically just from my experience. And as always, I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Which Scout primary weapon is your personal go-to and favorite? Let me know down in the comments below. And of course, as always, if you found this video informative and entertaining, please let me know by hitting that like button and consider subscribing today, as it really helps me out a lot. Rocket Stone Miners, I will see you in the next video.